Erik with Full Mount MMA, joined today by Ben Askren, who has a new book out, Funky, My Defiant Path Through the World of Combat Sports. Ben, how are you? Congratulations.
Look, I got it right here. Boom. Oh, upside down. I'm doing great. Was just outside doing some yard work. We got fall here in Wisconsin. So I had to get it done out there on the property.
I was going to say, beautiful out here in the Midwest. In Chicago, 70 today. You getting that too?
Yeah, we had some rough weather in October, and now the last week or 2 weeks has been really nice. Awesome.
That's good. I've been inside starting to read your book. Just got it yesterday.
Okay.
What's been the reaction so far in the release of your first book? I know this is something you've been thinking about for a while.
All positive. I haven't heard any negative yet, which is really nice. It seems like everyone who's getting the book and picking it up is really enjoying it. They're learning something. They're learning something about me, my thought process, how I made progress through both wrestling and mixed martial arts. So, yeah, it's really good.
It seems like it's more than just an autobiography. You know, it goes through your journey in combat sports, but it also towards the end has a lot of, your own philosophies towards life and competing. Why did you decide to kind of take that route instead of just doing like a straight autobiography of your life?
Well, so I worked with Chuck Mindenhall. He's my favorite writer of all time. And so it was a work between him and I. So I can't take all the credit, but it just fit because I think people are always curious about how athletes think. I read a ton. I mean, if let me see if my computer's connected enough. I'll see if I can show you my bookshelf. I got lights here, so you might not be able to see it, but over there, right? See, I have a very large bookshelf, and so I kind of knew what kind of biographies were my favorite. And the ones obviously you don't like. I don't know if you read a lot. The ones I don't like are the ones where it's very like cursory and surface level. I like it when guys go deep into their thought process and how they did something. It feels like they're taking you into the trenches, and so I want to do that with my own.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you mentioned working with Chuck Mindenhall. I've heard you talk about this in other interviews.
Yep.
The fact, he's a fantastic writer. I love his work as well. He did a great job capturing your voice. Like it sounds when I read,
real, right?
Yeah, it's exactly like the things that, you say, the things that you write. Is that like a strange process having somebody else write, so clearly how you're thinking?
Yeah. Well, I kind of knew what to expect because I've read his article before. I knew what to expect out of him. But I guess, still to the point when, you get the book and you read it and you're like, wait, it's like the exact wording I would use. It's kind of weird. One of the other things that is, it's really great about Chuck is that he not only, he knows me, but he knows the game of MMA. And so he's able to interweave that story and give context to a lot of things that were happening. Whereas someone who was outside of the world of MMA, they might not have contextual basis for some of the stuff that happened. And that's, I think he's really able to fill in some of the pieces there. And I think that makes it really nice.
Was it an easy process?
Yeah, I would say it was easy. It was longer than I thought, but it was good.
I like that the book starts out with your trade to the UFC. I know that's probably, especially with younger fans, where you started to get on a lot of people's radars and, people started looking back and, understanding just what a competitor you were. Obviously, you've mentioned this in the past, but you mentioned it as well in the book, your goal to compete against the best in the world. But when I was reading it, I was wondering, like, did you think when you were champ in Bellator and in one, beating guys like Douglas Lima and Koreshkov, did you ever think that, I actually am the pound for pound at welterweight, the best fighter in the world?
Obviously I thought I could compete with those guys. I mean, listen, I was training with UFC champions Anthony Pettis and Tyron Woodland on a really regular basis. And so it's not like this was some far off abstract notion of who the best is. And then, I've even I rolled with Rich Franklin, like Carlos Condit, Jake Shields. So kind of like not every one of the best guys, but a lot of the best guys I had worked out with in some way, shape, or form. I think for a while there, I think my peak in fighting was probably 2013, 2014, 15 was kind of really when I was at my apex, and then I think my body started going downhill and because of the hip issue. But it did take me a while when I broke in MMA. I mean, I started fighting in 2009 was my first fight, and I took my first fight probably 3 months after I ever started training. And so, when I won the Bellator belt, I'm a year and a half into my fighting career, and it took a while for me to learn all the other skills, all the jiu-jitsu, all the ground and pound, all the striking, all that stuff. It just took a while. But so yeah, I would say like Lima was my 10th fight. That one felt like things were starting to click. But then really, I would say my 11th and 12th, which would have been Karl Amasu and then Andrei Kreshkov. That was when like all the pieces were starting to fall into place for me about like, how do I do this? What's the most efficient path to victory? How do I finish people, for example? Because I had that streak of like, I think 5 straight decisions where I was really dominant. I just wasn't able to finish because I didn't have the weapons necessary. Yeah, so I think that was probably when it all clicked into place. So I'd say 2013, 14, 15 in there.
Yeah, that makes sense. You mentioned the hip issue there. I don't know if you remember this. The first time we talked was back in 2020. I think it was just like a week or two before you were going in to actually get the hip surgery.
No, I don't remember that. That's crazy.
It was so long ago at that point. But yeah, you had mentioned in that interview that you were going in to get this hip surgery in just a few days. In hindsight, reading about your hip issues again in the book and going back and watching that old interview, how different was the Ben Askren that made his UFC debut with these hip issues now to the one that was on top in Bellator and in one, do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really like to make excuses. My performance was what my performance was. Talking about the book, I was hindered by the hip issue, but I knew, hey, you get sometimes in life you get your shot when you get your shot. And was it the perfect time? No, it wasn't. But was I going to say no or not take it? Of course not. That was my opportunity. Not ideally when it was, when I would have liked it, but I went and did it.
You're not somebody with regrets. I get that from your interviews, obviously reading the book. But if you could go back and change something, I'm assuming you would go into the UFC earlier if you had the opportunity.
Yeah, it would be Dana would have signed me in 2013. Yeah, that would have been the right. So I finished my Bellator career 12-0, and then I would have had a seamless negotiation and would have went right to the UFC and started rolling. Yeah, because then I also probably would have been retired in probably like 2016 or somewhere around there, which would have been ideal. Yeah, that would have been much better if that could have happened.
Did you send Dana a copy of the book? I know you guys are on better terms.
I haven't. I don't have his address. So Dana, send me your address. I'll send you a book. I guess I could just send it to the UFC. Was it UFC PI?
Oh yeah, PI.
I think his office is there also. Yeah, it's funny. Because obviously Dana, I think with certain fighters tries to minimize the relationship he has with them and or the impact he plays. But then the reality of the situation is, Dana, you're the boss man, right? And so whether it's direct or indirect, his choices, his decisions, the way he runs his business has a distinct impact on many lives. And so, I think he tries to like downplay that or negate that a little bit. But the truth of the matter is he has effect on, right. If his, for whatever reason, his decision-making process was where it was, if it's not, I'm in the UFC in 2013. Right. And then I'm, instead of 2019. So I think he tries to minimize the impact he has, publicly minimizes it. But I think it's obvious to see.
But he knows. Deep down, right?
Of course. Dana's brilliant. Of course he knows.
Again, this is kind of the beginning of your book talking about the trade. You talked about how excited you were to go in and fight guys like Till. You mentioned Usman, all these welterweights that are coming up. What's it been like seeing how welterweights changed since you retired? You have Leon, that's now the champ, Khamzat coming up, Colby's still kind of inactive in a way. What's it been like to see that play out from the sidelines?
Well, yeah, I mean, there was a while there where pretty much all the guys I was trying to compete with were still the top of the top, and now there's kind of with Leon. I mean, Leon was obviously there when I was there also, right? But now there kind of has been, I guess, a passing of the torch from Usman to Leon, and you got I don't know if Chimaev's a welterweight or not. I think that's debatable. But I think you have some other, Bilal Muhammad, a guy. So he was a guy who was at Rufus while I was there. He's really starting to come into his own and win a whole bunch of fights. So, I guess I think you're having a passing of the guard to newer generation welterweights.
Yeah. I mean, you bring up guys like Khamzat and Bilal Muhammad. I heard you talking about in another interview, you think that Khamzat should probably be a middleweight. Like, what did you make of
We
the
missed
whole
weight
him
by nine
missing?
pounds or 8 pounds or whatever.
Yeah. Hey,
But
missed
then
weight by
it's a
a lot.
conspiracy. Did he do it on purpose? I don't know. Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. I'm not sure.
Do you like to think about stuff like that, or do you just not really pay too much attention?
It's interesting to consider. Yeah, I mean, no, it's interesting because I was trying to consider the way the world works, and when people say that conspiracy theory, it really like makes sense. Like, like how did it work out that well? I don't know. It did though. So yeah. No, but I don't know exactly what happened. I mean, that's the frustrating part is that you're never gonna know exactly what happened, because I'm not buddies with Chimaev.
Of course. It was good to see Nate Diaz go out on a win, though, right?
Mm, yeah, that was better because he would have been like a lamb to slaughter against Mr. Chimaev.
That wouldn't have been too good. It sounds like you still watch a lot of MMA. That's correct, right?
Yeah, I don't watch any other sports, so I watch a lot of wrestling. I mean, I run wrestling academies. That's my main uh time where my effort goes. Main place to spend my time. Yeah, so I don't watch all of them because it feels like there's something every single weekend. I do watch a lot. Obviously, the UFC app or the ESPN Plus app makes it relatively easy to flip something on. I may not watch the prelims, but tune in co-main, main event. That's interesting. And then I invested in a company called Verdict. Have you heard of them yet?
Of course.
Of course, yeah, they're great. So I may always make my picks every weekend on Verdict, so then that gives me another reason to follow along. Even though I don't know what it is, but even when you're gambling $5 and it's like, $5 is nothing, but it still feels like something fun to follow along with. So I think that's probably made me even watch more fights than I previously did. I probably watched a lot, and now I would say I watch almost every co-main and main event.
Yeah. That's about all you have to do. I mean, some of these cards, they're pretty shallow
Crazy.
nowadays when you
Yes,
have
for
when you have
real.
cards every week, right?
Well, and then the other thing that they do is they're doing this turnover. They're pushing a lot of the older, more expensive guys out, and then they're using the Dana White Contender Series to funnel new guys in at lower rates. And it doesn't seem to affect the business. UFC is killing it.
Do you think that makes fights less enjoyable though, as a fan?
Uh, for me, yeah, I would say it makes it harder to like I said, harder to follow where I'm only watching the top couple cards on the top couple fights on the card. But I think for a lot of people, the answer is probably no, because if the UFC, like I said, they're killing it. The numbers are huge.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you mentioned I wanted to go back to Leon Edwards and Kamaru Usman because you mentioned kind of a passing of the torch, if you will. The first thing I thought of when Usman got knocked out in that fight actually was, I hope he can handle this as well as you handled your first time getting a knockout loss. I mean, you famously handled that. I mean, I thought unusually well. Did you think that you handled it unusually well as well in comparison to other fighters?
I mean, people seem to say that, yes, but I mean, I was not something I take a ton of pride in, and I've really paid attention to how Usman's handled it. They're getting a rematch, so it seems like it will. Um, Seems like it'll be good for him.
I was going to say I haven't, just because he doesn't do as much media, it seems like these days, but I wasn't sure if you thought that he is or has the capability to handle it as well as somebody like yourself.
Yeah. Like I said, I haven't paid much attention, so it's hard for me to say.
No, that's fair. I wanted to talk about the epilogue of your book as well.
Yeah.
It's about the Jake Paul fight. I was curious why you decided to put that in the epilogue opposed to making it like its own chapter.
Well, because we started writing it in um September of 2020. So actually, like the first draft was pretty much always already finished by the time we got to that. Yeah, that's kind of why.
I didn't know if it was something more poetic, like it was kind of like the epilogue of your career because you're already retired or anything.
No, it
Anything
wasn't
like
anything
that.
like that. It was just we started in September, and yeah, so by the time April 2021 comes around, we were probably the majority of the way down with the first draft, and we thought it was fitting, and I think it does fit well in the book, and especially like I don't really consider it like a huge part of my career. I know a lot of people because of the stature of the fight know him. I paid attention to it, but for me, it was like just like man, whatever. I'll they asked me to fight. Sure, I'll go fight. Sounds like fun.
Obviously, he just beat Anderson Silva. He said actually, if he does beat Anderson Silva, that he would start a fighters union if he won. Do you buy that? Do you put any stock into that?
Sounds like a lot of effort. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's been a lot of attempts to do this before, and I don't think it's as easy as I think it's going to be.
Why is that? Do you think it's the individualists in
There's an
MMA?
individualist aspect to MMA. I mean, Dana is pretty heavy-handed about it. Do you remember there was that one with Bjorn, and it lasted like one day, and it was, but he had some big ass names. He had like GSP, Tim Kennedy, maybe Cerrone. There was like 5 or 6 of them, maybe Kane. Hold on, I'm getting these names right. I'm close. And so, yeah, I mean, like, it's definitely been tried before, and it just doesn't seem to work out, whether it's the Dana factor, whether it's the individualist factor. It's going to be a hard thing for him to actually do.
Yeah. Yeah, I was curious because, you were only in the UFC for 3 fights on what I assume is one contract. Is that right?
Yeah.
So I was, fighter pay has been something so debated and negotiated. I was wondering what your kind of stance was since it's back in the news again.
Yeah, I would say it's funny because I have multiple feelings. Sometimes it's hard to put them together in a coherent thought. Because I was talking to one of my coaches who's an up and coming fighter. He's fighting in Bellator at November 18th. And he said, "Oh, if I win this fight, I get to negotiate a new contract." And he was talking about the amount of money he wanted, or he was hoping he would get. And I said, when I won my Bellator title, my first fight as the Bellator champion was 14-14. And he's like, "Oh my God, I can't even freaking believe that." I was the Bellator champion. I was winning 14-14. And then, I escalated by 2-2 on that contract. So I believe my last fight might have been 24-24 or something, which is now, that's like kind of an intro level UFC fighter ish. And I was the champion for 6 fights, for God's sakes, So yeah, MMA pay has come a long way since the early days. The part that I struggle with is if you were really to go total free market, the high end fighters would probably deserve more, and the low end fighters would probably deserve a little less. Because I think those lower level UFC fighters are kind of interchangeable for a while, until you get a real name built up for yourself. And then the other thing I think about is I think like the UFC, for example, because they do have these longer duration contracts, puts a lot more investment into fighters. Whereas boxing, I don't even think a boxing fan could name 10 guys in one division. You know what I'm saying? Like welterweight, name 10 welterweights. In MMA, it's easy. You can name a whole bunch of them. And in boxing, like, I don't think there's a lot of boxing fans who'd be able to go 10 deep in weight classes.
No, that's a good point. And it seems like it varies so much person to person. I mean, I talked to Gray Maynard about it, and he was locked into this long deal for not a ton of money. And then I talked to Sam Alvey about it, and he felt that he was treated very well by the UFC. So it seems like...
Yeah, I think it's evolved. As they became more profitable, I think they have treated fighters better, for sure. But yeah, so I think it was like... man, in those early years, there just wasn't a lot of money to go around. And unfortunately, fighters like, I think those tough contracts were like 9 fights or something completely obnoxious,
Yeah. Well, back to the book here, because I want to wrap things up. I know you probably have a busy day.
Yes, sir.
Now that you have published the book, it seems like a good way to kind of mark the end of your competitive career, even if that was like a year ago. But what does the next chapter of your life look like?
Right now I am coaching wrestling. I'm doing some media, and that's kind of where I see myself staying. I really thoroughly enjoy both of those things. Our wrestling academies are doing really outstanding, and I'm a mentor to a lot of young men, so it's great.
Awesome. The book is called Funky: My Defiant Path Through the World of Combat Sports. Ben, before I let you go, anything else you wanted to shout out or promote? I'll give you the floor real quick.
No, that's it. Just check out the book. I think you'll really enjoy it. I think you'll gain something out of it. And I'm on Instagram and Twitter, but I mostly use Twitter, so you can follow me there.
All right, we'll link all that below. Ben, thank you again for the time, and congratulations.
Yeah, have a great day.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching this video. If you like our content, be sure to subscribe to Full Man MMA. And while you're at it, make sure to hit the bell icon as well so you never miss an update from us.